Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Carter, Professor Emeritus at Oregon Health and Science University, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to the launch of our second series of a four-part presentations. And all of these are discussing important issues for care partners of people with Parkinson's disease. This is our second year, as I mentioned, and if you missed our first year, please visit the WPC website. They're all there and easy to access. So before we get started, I have a couple of comments. The first is that I just simply would like to acknowledge that what a big impact COVID has had on all of us this last year. It's simply been a hard year for everybody. But I really want to acknowledge care partners because I think in many ways it's been almost harder for all of you. When you're a care partner, being able to access your support network and support people is such an important part of well-being, and that has been really diminished for many people. So I say that just because I want you to know that we are here for you. We hope we provided something very helpful for you today. And most of all, just to know that you are not alone. There are many people out there in your very same situation, and we are here to help you. So the other thing is that I also want to mention that after our last series, we received some feedback, which we found very, very important. And that feedback was the content that we presented around some rather difficult issues such as mood changes and cognitive changes. The audience sometimes felt that the presenters were sometimes more positive than the lived experience, and they wanted to talk about the hard stuff more than was talked about. And we really took that to heart. We recognize that we don't want to sugarcoat anything that you're living with, but we want to be optimistic and positive. And so our panel are really prepared to present a nice balance of the difficult issues as well as being positive in how to manage those issues. We're going to really look deeply at resilience, how to access that personally, and a variety of other topics. So we thank you for that feedback, and we really hope this year provides you with some good information. I also want to remind all the listeners that you come from a wide range of different experiences, emotionally, physically, experientially, different cultures, and different places that you are in this disease process. Some people are early in the disease, some people are later in the disease, and with that come different experiences. And I bring that up because if you find that you're really hearing some content you already know, please understand that there are other people listening that might be new for them. No matter where you are, you will gain something from this, and we're excited to be able to present this particular session. Today we have around 300 registrants. They come from 14 different countries, and although most of them are care partners, we do have people with Parkinson's disease, as well as a nice spectrum of healthcare professionals. We have doctors, nurses, NPs, OTs, PTs, speech, and even a few pharmacists. So welcome all of you. Now, if some of you listening need to leave before the hour's over, please do something for us and do our little survey. You can see the button in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. It's just 5 questions. We actually really rely on that information. And we've even put your name in a drawing for a free Parky the Raccoon WPC mascot. So we do hope, we do ask you and hope that you'll do that. So today we're going to be talking about care partners and self-care throughout their journey. And this session will really it'll focus on self-care, what it looks like, what it means, why it's important, but also how to access it, especially when it takes a dive on the priority list and you find it kind of at the bottom, how to bring it back to a position of importance and prominence. And also, if it's never been on the priority list, how to bring it into your life. So while the speakers are talking, you have the ability to ask questions online through the chat function. And I probably will ask each speaker one question after they talk, but the majority of questions will be at the end of the panel. So I'd like to start by introducing our four panelists. The first one is Amanda Janicke. And Amanda is a licensed clinical social worker. She has worked, she works with the Parkinson's Foundation on their helpline and has answered many, many questions from both care partners and others about Parkinson's disease. Our second panelist is Julia Wood, and Julia is a licensed or an occupational therapist. She has expertise in really promoting and working and teaching interdisciplinary care of Parkinson's disease. She's also developed a number of community-based engagement programs to improve quality of life for those living with Parkinson's disease. And then our two care partner experts, we have Angela Robb, whose husband was diagnosed very young, in his 20s, and they have lived with Parkinson's disease for a number of years, I believe around 25. Angela is the co-editor of asoftvoice.com and also a Reiki master, which you'll learn more about. In 2015, she received the distinguished honor of at the White House as a champion of change for Parkinson's disease. And then last but not least is Alan Ater. And Alan is a graduate of Southern Methodist University. He loves being retired and is a great world traveler. He's lived around the world, and he's also has identified that he's visited 87 countries, and he's not done yet. So he has a wide breadth of experience in the world. I should also mention that we have two wonderful sponsors today, Supernus Pharmaceuticals, who has agreed to and committed to be a platinum support sponsor for the World Parkinson's Coalition in 2022 in Barcelona, and also Kiowa Kirin. These two sponsors make these series possible, and honestly, we would not be here without them. So thank you, thank you. Let's get started, and I'm going to start with introducing Amanda, who is going to be talking about self-care. What does it mean, and will it really be helpful?
Thank you, Julie. I feel honored to be sharing my thoughts on the topic of self-care today. And I think many people have a general sense that self-care means taking an active role in protecting your own well-being. So before I describe different types of self-care, I'd like for us to consider why it's even important that we're talking about self-care, why it matters. And I want to start off today by acknowledging that you, the care partners listening, you usually wear many caregiving hats. You often offer a very wide variety of support to your loved ones with Parkinson's on a daily and weekly basis. And that support falls along a continuum that may range from helping with administrative, organizational tasks to helping with very hands-on physical tasks your loved one may need help with, and everything in between. Regardless of the exact type of support you're offering your loved one with Parkinson's, caregiving comes with an emotional weight. There's a heaviness to it because it's so important to you. Care partnering has become a priority, a value in your life. You have a drive to help your loved one, to do what you can to support their independence, their well-being, health, and safety. So, on top of the many ways you act as a care partner, the things you do for your loved one, it comes with an emotional investment because you have a relationship with them outside of caregiving, whether they're your significant other, your parent, other family member, or friend. So, when you consider then all the mental, physical, and emotional energy that's tied into caregiving, you can really start to see how much it requires of you as a person. And whether you've been in the care partner role a long time or you feel new to it, I think it's the long haul nature of Parkinson's caregiving that makes self care so crucial and important to practice, even at the point of your loved one receiving a Parkinson's diagnosis. Because when your loved one has Parkinson's, it's not just one whirlwind weekend of caregiving and then you're done where you can rest and resume normal life. Instead, life is different. There's a new normal where it can sometimes feel like there's a third person in the relationship you have with your loved one. It's you and your significant other plus their PD. It's you and your parent plus their PD. And sometimes the addition of Parkinson's in the relationship seems to be pretty integrated and smooth. The weight of it is pretty light. It doesn't take up a lot of space in the relationship. And really, many care partners find caregiving quite rewarding and something that brings a lot of meaning to their lives. There can be times, though, when it can feel like Parkinson's or the worries about Parkinson's are like edging out both you and your loved one and taking up a lot of room in the relationship and in your life. So when it feels like Parkinson's is taking over the relationship, even though acting as a care partner is a priority for you, it may mean things are getting out of alignment and off balance in your life. And things may have gotten off balance because perhaps there have been a string of challenges lately associated with your loved one's Parkinson's that have required a lot from you, or maybe on a daily basis you feel pressure to do a lot because they need a lot. Perhaps your loved one has actually been doing just fine, but it's hard to shake the worries you have about their well-being, or maybe the grief you feel about how things have changed since the diagnosis. When someone we care about so much needs a lot from us, or we worry about them a lot, our own needs can become harder to recognize or just may seem less important. And when that continues to happen day in, day out, sometimes without even realizing it, the other parts to your identity, aside from being a care partner, can get lost and your own needs don't end up getting met. And since things are off balance and your own needs are not adequately met, you may become drained, anxious, depressed, resentful, burned out. You're giving so much and you can be left depleted. And when you're drained and depleted, you may lose sight of what you find so rewarding about caregiving to begin with. So when you love someone who has Parkinson's and you're in that care partner role, really the best gift you can bring to your relationship is yourself, the version of you that prioritizes self-care. Because we know there can be no caregiving from you if you're sick or run down, or worse yet, if you're in the hospital, maybe because you pushed too hard to do it all. Really, the best gift you can bring to your loved one is taking care of yourself and being kind to yourself, doing whatever it is that helps you refuel, replenish, recharge. To truly live by your value of caring for your loved one, it must also involve then caring for your own well-being too, and saving some of that compassion for yourself. And another big benefit of making time for self-care and making sure your own needs are met is that it helps you become a more resilient care partner, because you know there are those tough days, those rough patches when more is needed from you. Regular self-care could help you build up the reserves of energy needed during those tough times. And if you decide to make self-care a priority, you're really supporting the future you, and that will only help your loved one with Parkinson's. Integrating self-care into your routine early and often helps you stay connected to other parts of your identity outside of caregiving, restores a sense of hopefulness about the future, helps you create boundaries, and helps you rebalance your life as much as possible so that you can feel more like yourself, resilient, and ready for the next day. And when you take some time to reflect about the balance or imbalances in your life, you may also be more readily able to recognize when it's time to ask for some help. And if you're in a position right now where you can't envision making any time for self-care because your loved one needs so much from you, it's a sign that it probably is too much for one person alone and that you probably could use some outside help. Again, the mental, physical, and emotional energy needed for caregiving can sometimes just get too heavy. You don't have to shoulder it all alone, and really sometimes the safest decision for both you and your loved one is to get some extra help. And when you allow yourself to ask for help with some of those care partner duties, it allows more room for your own needs to get met. So I've talked about the why self-care is important. It isn't because you need to be a perfect care partner, but rather self-care helps you to be a resilient care partner, helps you to prevent burnout. I'd like to just take another few moments to comment a little more about the different types of self-care. I'd encourage you to think of self-care holistically. Your self-care needs may be physical, which would be actions you take to nourish your body. Your self-care needs may be emotional, steps you take to honor your feelings and support your mental health. Spiritual self-care means prioritizing whatever nourishes your soul. Self-care can mean tending to your social needs, your relationships. It can be intellectual, meaning self-care that nourishes your mind. Self-care really means making an intentional effort to do whatever helps you feel rested, recharged, like the whole you, more balanced. Thank you. That wraps up what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Amanda. I do have one question for you from the audience before we go on to our next speaker. And this question is, let's see, I'll get it. I try to be positive and encouraging with my wife who has Parkinson's disease, but I'm really starting to struggle because her apathy is so severe. I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. What self-care do you recommend?
I think this would be an opportunity for emotional self-care, as I think there'd probably be many feelings of grief and maybe even despair that come with not being able to really influence that apathy symptom despite all you've tried. So I'd say allow yourself to see and honor those feelings around this challenging symptom, which may mean getting extra support to process those feelings and taking breaks so that you can try to recharge from those feelings.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to Julia Wood, and Julia is going to be talking about even when days are busy, you really can weave self-care into your life. Start with self-compassion. You're muted, Julia.
Lately, I click the button and it doesn't unclick. Thanks. Thanks for having me. I said that was actually the phrase of 2020. You're on mute. I'm off to a good start. As an occupational therapist, I've dedicated my skills and my energy to helping people live their lives to its fullest, and whatever that means to a unique individual. And this can include identifying barriers. And I wanted to start with that because I felt like I could almost feel the audible eye roll of here's somebody else coming on telling me how to do self-care. So I thought, let's just acknowledge it, right? There's barriers for all of us for participation that can come up. And for care partners, many obstacles can come up. And I found in my practice that when I was working with a client, I always had to work as well with a care partner because their relationship with the patient and also their relationship with me was important because we really had to work as a team. And so I often saw these obstacles come up and tried to help people overcome them as best they could for the best of the family unit. So when you think about these obstacles, though, what I've noticed, and this is for myself as well, is, some of them can be real, but then sometimes they're perceived. And I'm not here to invalidate anyone's experience whatsoever. We all walk different paths. We all have different challenges. We all have different barriers. Some of these we have no control over, like those motor fluctuations or lack of sleep or fatigue that we see our loved one go through. But others we can unintentionally impose on ourselves, like limiting beliefs and negative self-talk. And I think we all have times that we do that and create essentially our own barriers. So taking some time to identify what your perceived barriers to self-care are can be a really important first step to identifying what your needs can be. Make a list of the reasons that you feel you cannot prioritize time for yourself. Some will be everyday things that we all hear about. There's never enough time or money, right? But others might be attitudes where you view yourself as selfish for needing time for yourself, or maybe you think that the other person's needs are more important than yours. Take some time to look at what you wrote down. What are facts? What is real? What is maybe just a misconception or a value or an attitude or belief that's not working out? So once you've acknowledged those barriers, how can we move to a place where we prioritize self-care, even if maybe there's all these obstacles and we can't even figure out how to fix or overcome all of them? Because often there's not an easy answer, and I'm not here to pretend that I have it. Research suggests actually that to foster self-care, we have to start with self-compassion. And so when we acknowledge our own feelings, our hurts, our needs, and strive to provide the same compassion and understanding that we would offer to a friend, to ourselves, that is self-compassion. That also includes acknowledging our limitations. We cannot do everything alone, and giving ourselves a permission to understand that we can be imperfect and we can make mistakes. But in order to acknowledge our feelings, we have to become mindful and aware of them. So we're going to take a little self-compassion break together. So I'd like for you to sit comfortably. If you'd like to close your eyes, that's fine. If you'd like to just pick something to focus on in the room, you can. And I just want you to take a moment and think back to either a recent event or maybe something in the past that happened that stuck with you, where you had a negative moment. It was a struggle. There was some, an issue in your care partnering relationship. Maybe harsh words were said, or maybe you felt there wasn't a solution. Whatever it was, you weren't happy with either the situation or yourself or the outcome. And just think about that moment and acknowledge it. Think about how that felt. Sometimes we need to name what we're feeling. This is hard, or this was a struggle, or, this was painful or hurtful. And then we have to have a moment to, part of self-compassion is this shared humanity. And there's no bigger example than where we are right now for shared humanity. You're on a webinar with all of these people, hundreds of people from around the world that are all experiencing those same challenges that you are. So you're not alone in it. And then lastly, we always want to think of having a moment where we're kind to ourselves then. The biggest component of self-compassion is self-kindness. If you'd like, you can place your hands on your heart or anywhere that feels comfortable. And just take a moment to take a few deep breaths. And think about communicating with yourself or viewing yourself like you would a friend. If you had a dear friend who went through that same experience, that same struggle, that same suffering that you just went through, what would you say to them? How would you view them? How would you give yourself the same compassion and kindness how would you give that to yourself? Take a few more deep breaths, just allowing yourself to rest in that moment of feeling that it's okay. It's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to share that suffering with someone. It's okay to acknowledge your feelings. When you're ready, take a moment and we'll step out of the practice and just give yourself a moment to feel your body. What are you feeling right now? You don't have to judge anything or put a name to it, but just notice what's happening. Sometimes just giving ourselves that moment of validation, just a moment to check in and see what's happening. What am I feeling? What is going on? Can fill your cup, like Amanda said, can fill our reserves and give us that energy we need. Because the important thing to remember is that self-care strategies are unique and deeply personal to you and your values. So essentially, self-awareness is fundamental to self-care. So you have to not only acknowledge your feelings, but think about and acknowledge what you need in that moment. So now that we've kind of laid the foundation for that, I want you to think of creating a toolbox. So Amanda mentioned those different dimensions, physical, emotional, spiritual, intellectual, social. If your self-care was a garden, what's thriving and what needs some tending? You probably have some areas maybe where everything's doing well. Maybe you're taking care of yourself physically, or maybe you're meeting your needs, intellectually, but there's some other areas that are really not going as well. So I want you to think of some strategies here. Once you kind of identify what you need to do, think of using daily occurrences or annoyances as a reminder for self-care. So when the notification goes off on an email or a text, take that as a moment to stop and take a deep breath, or 3, or 10. When the phone rings, think about something you're grateful for before you answer it. You can also chunk self-care. So try pairing a moment of self-care with a task that you do every day. Maybe you stretch while you watch television, walk around the yard or the block when you go to get the mail, do a favorite exercise or a yoga pose before you sit for a meal, take a few deep breaths when you're taking your medication. So all of those can be ways to get little moments of self-care. And then think of keeping activities out that you can enjoy when you have a free moment. Some magnetic poetry, or maybe a poem, or a puzzle on the table to do. Creating some self-care cards where you write affirmations or mantras or prayers on them and can grab one in a minute and have a hot second of self-care. And then also have fun, be playful, play music, dance, sing, both. Blow bubbles, keep a chalkboard, a whiteboard, or a canvas out and have a moment of creativity. When you're moving around your house, maybe do walking lunges, going to the bathroom or to the kitchen, or side lunges to get a little exercise in. We can always throw in these moments where we just acknowledge ourselves and what we need. Take a second and feel, do I need something physical? Do I need something emotional? Do I need to call a friend? What do I need right now? So in summary, there's a lot of barriers, but think about how you can carve out little moments for yourself. And just like we all can't maybe take a 30 or 40-minute walk every day, they say if we take those 3 10-minute walks, that evens it. So it's like taking a little sip of self-care throughout the day. And I wanted to leave you with one of my favorite self-care cards that I have, which is from a poem by Max Ehrmann. You're a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. In the noisy confusion of life, keep peace with your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful. Strive to be happy. Be well. Thank you all for your time and attention.
Thank you, Julia. That was wonderful. I do have a question for you before we move on to our next speaker. And the question is, I had a great self-care routine before the pandemic, but it's been disrupted and I'm having a hard time reestablishing it. Do you have any suggestions?
That's such a great question. And I've actually been working through that with several care partners recently. And so what I found was successful with the people I've been working with is looking at what were those self-care things you were doing before. If it was going to the gym and maybe your gym's closed, you're not comfortable, trying to find another resource for that. Maybe it's an exercise group virtually. Maybe it's, getting an exercise magazine or book and following along, following a DVD, but finding something else to plug into that time slot. If it was getting coffee with a friend, maybe you Zoom with a friend or walk around the block or take a walk with a friend. But I think look at what were those tasks you were doing. And the one, I think, silver lining to the pandemic cloud has been that there's so many virtual resources now. There's exercise groups, there's mindfulness, there's, I think there's goat yoga online. Not sure, you have to bring your own goat, I believe. So whatever it might be, plug something in there that's meaningful to you, find a new resource for it, and enjoy yourself. Great question.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to Angela Robb and Alan Ater. And we're going to start with Angela, and they're both going to be speaking to us today about how care partners can realistically include self-care in their lives when there's so much going on. And this is really from the mouth of the people who live it. So we'll start with Angela.
Thanks, Julie. And thank you, Amanda and Julia, for all your wonderful tips. Realistically, it's something you really have to work at. Self-care is certainly something, as was mentioned in the beginning, I've been with Carl for 25 years. And it's really been a journey of self-care. Of course, everybody's journey is a little bit different, where you come in to the cycle, I guess. And it's honestly something I really had to work with in the beginning. Initially, I was not very good at it, and I did not have very many tools in my toolbox, as Julia mentioned. I crafted my toolbox over time, and tried to pay attention to the signs along the highway, pointing me in the right direction. First and foremost, as you've heard previously, is that you really have to have compassion for yourself in order to set out into this journey to make yourself a priority. And making yourself a priority or advocating for your self-care is not selfish. It's really something that has been mentioned before, that you really have to invest in yourself so that you have the stamina to go on this Parkinson's journey, because it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And we want to be very cognizant of the fact that we do need to care for ourselves. And I have to concur with what Julia said, which is, and the question that was asked by the audience, COVID-19 completely obliterated my self-care plan. I have to be honest. You might as well just take it. I think somebody called it a dumpster fire. Well, that essentially is what happened in my self-care plan. I was very much trying to do what Amanda mentioned, which is balance the body, mind, and spirit. I would go to a gym 4 to 5 days a week. I also participated in rock steady boxing with my husband. I walked my dog. And those were all great physical outlets for me. At the same time, I practiced my Reiki. I did mindfulness meditation, which helps with my mind and my body. I also participated in local support group programs, face-to-face support group programs. And all those things were quite great until COVID hit. And then there was no gym. My dog passed away on March 8th of last year. So right after we locked down, or right before we locked down, she passed away. So I lost my walking partner, I lost my gym. And then the shift for the workouts, actually, Carl started doing his Rock Steady at home. So I became a partner in his Rock Steady workout program. The mindfulness and the Reiki took a while to kind of come back online because of the fact I think I was so anxious and fearful of COVID and coping with the changes and being home all the time, shifting the care of my household, etc. So it did take me quite a while. I'm actually still in the process of rebuilding my self-care plan. So that's one thing I encourage, as Julia mentioned, you have to have a diverse set of tools in order to shift and move as you go through this particular journey. But one thing I did for myself is I really tried hard not to forgive myself, because there's no reason for me to let that little self-critic tell me, oh, you really should be working out. Did you eat that piece of cake? I think you need to be going to the gym. I don't need to hear that self-critic. That just puts the weight on you even more. And as I think Amanda said, we're all not perfect. So we really do need to be flexible and give ourselves a break and give ourselves some self-love and to give ourselves forgiveness. The other thing that has been very apparent during this pandemic is that I have to communicate my boundaries with my husband. We are constantly working on a communication, especially being in close quarters during the pandemic. It's really become apparent that I have to set the boundary and say, I'm going to take a half hour and I'm going to go do some stretching for myself. And I'd like for you to honor the boundary of giving me this time, or as was mentioned earlier, taking smaller chunks, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and just kind of taking a break for myself. But having some forgiveness, being okay if I had to abandon a self-care tool to do something else. Flexibility is extremely important for me. And the other thing that I think is important in self-care is planning for the long term. making sure you're getting your doctor appointments, you're taking care of your own healthcare needs. Are there any kind of legal preparations or financial preparations you need to do? That's self-care as well, although it's a long-term self-care plan. So please be kind to yourself. You are not alone. We are here to help you. There's lots of resources that are online. I'm actually taking advantage of those myself. And I'm also, I've been working with a small counseling group through this time. So, dig into your toolbox and see what you can do for yourself, and be safe out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angela. Very inspirational words. I do have a question for you. This person is very committed to self-care, but says, my spouse is so anxious when I leave that it makes me feel guilty and it hampers my self-care motivation. Any suggestions?
Well, I think sometimes in some forms of Parkinson's, the separation can cause a lot of anxiety. And I would encourage, the communication tools. If you have a cell phone and they have a cell phone, let them know that they can reach out to you or call you or text you, even during your self-care time. So for instance, if I had, my husband had that issue, I might say, I'm going to go take a 5-minute walk and I'll just go around the neighborhood. I'll be available on my cell phone. You can reach me. And then maybe even build on it. Do that for a few days, see how that goes, and then maybe extend the distance or extend the time. I think, sometimes we have to re-communicate and re-cue our loved ones just to let them know that we're close by, but we're not out of touch. And building that confidence, I think, Julie, would be the best way to overcome that. And whatever you can do to do that, I think would be important.
And do you have this question also talks about guilt, because guilt is one of those barriers I think Julia brought up. Any thoughts about dealing with guilt, how you get it out of the way?
Well, I have to say during COVID, I think there probably was a couple times where I felt a little guilty for leaving because we had been together for so long. It was even me who was having some guilt, having that more. He wasn't saying it, I was having it myself. But I think that's when we come back to the foundation of understanding that the self-care is extremely important, and it is important for the long run. And the guilt, the critic, that's something you really probably should take a look at and see, why am I feeling that particular way? And then try to reinforce with your self-compassion and self-love that this is necessary to take care of yourself. I did think of one other thing. If your loved one is a little concerned about you being gone away, maybe there's a way for somebody to come over and socially distance with masks and stay with your loved one while you do go out and take care of yourself. So I thought of that, Julie, while I was talking.
That sounds great. Thank you. All right. Last but not least, Alan will share with us his experiences as a care partner.
Great. Hi, and thanks. Very happy to be here. One of the things I noticed right away in listening to Angela is there's one of the common themes, and she kind of stole one of my lines, which is for all of us to recognize that this journey we're on is not a sprint, that it's a marathon. And so just a little with my background, I come from a law enforcement background. And when my wife was diagnosed, we were both in our early 40s and we had small children. And kind of being that type A guy, I thought that one of my jobs was to solve all of everybody's problems, to take care of everything. And I tried for a long time. But sooner or later realized you just can't do that. I couldn't do that. And so there were a couple of things I did, one of which was, and this really gets to the heart of my self-care, was to realize that I needed to take care of my own demons first. If I was going to be the husband that I wanted to be, if I was going to be the father that I wanted to be, if I was going to be the care partner I wanted to be, I first had to figure myself out. And it was hard, again, coming from my background. But for me, my biggest problem was that I knew for a long time I had suffered from depression. And that was a hard thing to admit. And even harder to finally go seek some help for it, which I did. That was one of the best things I ever did. It eased a lot of my burdens and put a lot of things in perspective. Part of that is realizing that, again, getting back to the fact that this is a marathon and not a sprint, was also trying to look for, and I know we've talked about this, nobody wants to have Parkinson's, and it's not, something that you want in your life. But there are some positives that have come out of it. Again, I had some young children at the time, and I'm very proud and very happy to say that in all of us, we've gained a lot of empathy towards people. My children are very kind, to others, and a lot of that has to do with growing up with a mother having Parkinson's. And here I'll also mention that Parkinson's runs in our family. My wife is a LRRK2 carrier. Her mother has Parkinson's. She was diagnosed about 5 years before my wife was, and her only sibling, her sister, has Parkinson's too. So in a way, I've been a care partner, not just to my wife, but also extended family, and so have my kids. And so again, it's not Parkinson's is no fun, but there have been some positives that have come out of it. My kids especially, being much kinder. It's also taught us to slow down. Again, that goes back to that kind of that type A thing with me, trying to get everything done right away. But when I realized that I couldn't do it all, and that it was a marathon, not a sprint, that we just had to slow down and accept what Parkinson's was going to give us in our lives, and work with that. We still have our goals. I think at the very beginning we mentioned we're all about travel and exploring the world. And I know the knee-jerk reaction would have been, those dreams have to disappear. We're never going to be able to do that. But my wife and I, are bound and determined to do everything we could to still see the world. We both retired early, and we just decided, we're going to do it, but maybe a little slower. Maybe we're not going to run around, and hop on, jump over cliffs and parachute and all that stuff, but we can still live our dreams. So let's see, what else did I have to say? And I guess really the only last thing was learning how to set limits, and that all comes together. I've learned how to say no. Which, thank you, Angela. Yes, that's important. That goes back to setting my own limits, learning how to say no, accepting the realities of what it is, but molding ourselves for that journey.
Thank you.
I hope that made sense.
Thank you very much. One question to you. You talked about your history with how you've changed. But if there was one thing that you wished you would have known at the beginning of these 16 years, what would that have been as a care partner?
Yeah, no, that one's actually pretty easy. Again, in short, what it was is to recognize that everybody's Parkinson's journey is different. I think there's a saying within the community, if you've met one person with Parkinson's, guess what? You've met one person with Parkinson's. I remember when my wife was first diagnosed, we're in our early 40s, and we went to a support group, and it was all old people, and we're in our early 40s, and we have young kids. We had nothing in common with these people. They were all nice, but that was not going to be us. It might, 40 years down the road, but it certainly wasn't going to be us right then. So my advice for everybody, especially newly diagnosed, is realize this disease, if you don't know it already, is very different in that it manifests itself differently in everybody. Even within my own family, My mother-in-law's symptoms and her treatments are different than my wife's, and they're different from her sister's. So everybody's journey is unique. It will play out differently. So don't think by looking at somebody who has Parkinson's and maybe they're really struggling that that's going to be your future. It might, but likely it won't. Everybody's going to have to live their own life.
All right. Thank you all very, very much. We're now going to turn to some of the additional questions from the audience. And the first one I'm going to start with, I'm actually going to pose this question first to Amanda, and then either Angela or Alan can answer this. It's from a care partner who says, so they've been a care partner for about 7 to 10 years. It is very scary to me to be so dependent upon. How can I address this?
That's a great question. I think I feel that, and I respect you for recognizing that you feel fearful about that. I think for me, the idea of being kind of fearful around feeling so dependent upon, to me, I just think like spread it around. Like where is there room to spread this around a little bit? There's also a phrase I've recently learned, and I wonder if it would fit in this case. It's I get to instead of I have to or I need to. It's like you kind of have this opportunity to play such a large role. There's a lot of meaning there, but I think it is scary because I think the pressure's on, but it doesn't have to be all on you. And really it can't be all on you. You can't be the doctor, the spouse or significant other. You can't be, the parent and, doing everything. It really, I would think again, who's in your village? And if you don't feel like you have a village, like let's start building it, because long-term, I think having those people that you can turn to, whether it's even just for you or, for your loved one, I think it will require more than just you. It really just can't be all you in the long run, is what I would say.
Angela, Alan, anything to add to that?
I think Amanda's spot on. You have to build your village and your care team. And evaluate, is there family? Are there friends? Are there medical professionals or healthcare professionals or healthcare providers who can help you with that? That's the strength. We talk about care team for people with Parkinson's, but there is also a care team for care partners for someone with Parkinson's. I don't be afraid to accept any kind of help. That's one, when I've heard some people say, well, I get offered for, people say they want to help me, but it takes me a lot of time to figure out what I actually want help with. But, if you know that, say you have a family member or friend who's really good at one thing, like even just baking a casserole. Well, Sue said that she wanted to help me and she's a good baker or good cook. Hey, maybe I could get her. Could you provide us like one casserole a week to help me not have to make meals? Something even as small as that. So I heard a long time ago, somebody had a list of small things that people could help out with, to get your friends and family involved, and to also increase the social component, of course, with COVID, with a mask on and socially distant. But I think getting some help in a care team would be extremely helpful.
It's also really helpful to think about what you're being dependent upon for. Are you being dependent upon for what your physical tasks, or is it the emotional responsibilities? And once you figure out what those things are, maybe it's easier to start parsing out the answers. Ellen, you had something to say.
Yeah, no, and this is a very tangible thing. In our case, we knew that getting around and mobility was going to become a problem, so we sold our house. So that we didn't have to worry about the yard and the roof and cleaning out the gutters and all of that stuff. And we did that while we were able, knowing that down the road that was going to become more of a challenge and more of a burden, especially on me. And so we accepted what it was we were facing and said, you know what, let's make these changes. Let's make our life as easy as we can in those things that we can change, and lower that pressure. I know that's very hard for some people to do. They love their home. They love their gardens. But, you know, how long are you going to love it for when it's just taking all of your time and all of your energy? I would just encourage people to have that deep conversation with themselves. What can they change physically, tangibly in their life to make it easier?
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Those are really thoughtful comments. So we have a number of other questions. This one, actually both Amanda and Julia, I think would be helpful to answer this. What are your favorite go-to resources? Actually, everybody can, but let's start with Amanda and Julia. Go-to resources for care partners. So many resources out there. What do you turn to for support, and where do you guide the care partners you work with?
Sure. I think, of course, coming from the Parkinson's Foundation myself on the helpline, I love the Caring and Coping book. I think that gives a really comprehensive look at caregiving, a lot of great tips. But I guess I also like to suggest considering what might be outside of the Parkinson's world a little bit, and that kind of tends to other parts of your identity, because I think that those things, those other parts of your identity help you, I think, feel connected to who you are as a person outside of that role, and can carry you along in those harder times. So I'm thinking, okay, like what just feeds your soul? What helps you feel good? Is it a hobby? So I think there's kind of a parallel path. On the one hand, I love exploring caregiving resources. On the other hand, I always say, like, what else is out there aside from Parkinson's that you can get into that's just for you, so that you can kind of keep going, with your own, with your kind of, again, what feeds your soul. It helps you, I think, get through. So that's my input there.
Absolutely. And, some resources that I give out a lot. I love Insight Timer. It is a great app as far as if you want a brief, quick 3-minute, 1-minute, self-compassion, meditation. If you want a, mindful movement or a yoga class, there's all kinds of things on there for free. There are also courses you can pay for. But that is a resource I definitely use a lot because there's so much in it. I like the National Caregiver Alliance as well. I think they have a lot of great resources that you can tap into as well. And I can look and find out where I got this, but there was a great resource online too, that self-care strategies for family caregivers. And it was from, I believe, British Columbia, one of their alliances there. And so there's a lot of great, things that you can look to and resources that you can find. Kristen Neff, and her website is great for self-compassion. So if you're looking for activities or articles or things you want to explore self-compassion a little bit more, I think that's great. But if you even Google self-care for care partners or caregivers, there's so much out there. And I mentioned earlier, making your own self-care cards. You can actually buy them. There are decks of self-care cards that you can get that have different ideas just for inspiration for you to do. So I say, Google whatever you're looking for, whatever it might, seem you might want. It's probably out there. Someone more than likely has it. But I'd say those are some of my favorites for sure.
Julia, why we have you on the stage?
Yeah.
Someone wanted to know the author of the poem or that you
Max
read.
Ehrman. That's the Desiderata by Max Ehrman. I hope I said that correctly. I don't know why, but that poem, I've had it in the Desiderata by Max Ehrman, Ehrmann. I think I spelled that right. And that was just a brief clip of it. But I've had that poem, and I'll find it printed and hang it on my wall. I have it in an index card. I'll have it with me at all times. I don't know what it is that brings me some solace in a moment. And you may have something completely different for you. But I think if you find words or images or whatever it is that brings you comfort, keep them close, have them handy. Thank you.
Okay, this is a question I'm going to have Alan and Angela answer this. So this question is, my husband is the polar opposite of what he used to be in many ways. And so for her, patience is the biggest hurdle. Tips for incorporating patience when it's really hard. And we can, if Julia or Amanda have questions, if you're not speechless, I know that.
I think Julia said something about the power of the breath, like 1 breath or 3 breaths or 10 breaths. Sometimes it just takes a breath. It takes some training. I will confess that I've had to train myself sometimes to breathe before I respond. It really does work, because it kind of is a reset. I recently heard somebody say you can use a reset button, and hit the button and start all over again. I haven't totally got to the reset button, but I've gotten to the breath. So I find the power of the breath and taking a pause can really be helpful.
My thought is, obviously everybody's in a different position. I don't know, how old this person is, or if they're still working, what kind of responsibilities they have. But I kind of equate in my own life, I don't always have the greatest amount of patience either, but I equate patience kind of with stress. And I go back to what I said earlier. We've made conscious decisions along our journey to remove as many of the extraneous stresses that we can. Again, we sold our house and moved into a condo. Those things that pile on, that you can remove. If you can do that, that can help.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alan. I think stress is a huge factor when it comes to patience.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I'm more stressed, the patience just kind of falls out the window. So yeah, that's when going back to my practices like mindfulness and Reiki and all that can be very helpful. Even music.
You can't get rid of all stress, but you can get rid of some if you want to, and make that choice to do so. And that would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
The other thing I would say is don't be afraid to take a moment. If you need a break before, if you need to pause before you respond to something, go out, take a lap around your neighborhood and come back. Ask for it, with your loved one, even practice it. Say, I just need a time out, and then go back and come back so that, that it all doesn't build up and then kind of explode. I've exploded. So,
the only other thing I'll add, and again, this was just me, but it goes back to, I suffered from depression, and I finally got to the point where I knew that I needed some help, and I got that help, and that was important.
All right, we have probably time for one more quick question, and I will just say that the panelists have agreed, this is to the audience, the panelists have agreed to stay for an extra few minutes. So, so this one is from Oregon, and this person is saying that I am a care partner and I find myself increasingly running away from it, with a recognition, by taking long naps. How can I redirect myself to better self-care? And Amanda, I'm going to have you respond to this one.
Sure. Again, I give you credit for recognizing this pattern. And I mean, I think it's a sign that a lot of people probably have experienced at one point or another, whether in the caregiving role or something else, where being asleep helps you kind of manage in that moment. But you can see it's not really sustainable. It's not something that you can kind of continue to do to meet your other priorities or values in your life. So my first thought is to talk with your doctor. I always like to start with a doctor. You never know if there's something else going on that's kind of that could be addressed by the doctor. I know sometimes I've heard people even say, well, my doctor found out, I was low on this certain vitamin and, helps me with my energy and I can kind of face things a little bit better. So I would say start with a doctor that you trust, but also that's where I think about really, like other people have said, acknowledging what's going on that may be kind of pushing you to kind of want to just take a escape from everything, and who can be your support. What kind of support can you bring into your life? Maybe it's professional support, counselor. Maybe it's figuring out how to get more breaks for yourself so that you can actually get out and do other things that you'd like to do. There's no one size fits all with something like this, but I think talking to a doctor, considering professional support, because there can be something like depression. I mean, sleeping all the time can be a symptom of depression, or even just kind of the energy that can be drained from someone when they're really feeling anxious about what's going on too. So that's where I'd say I'd start. But again, kudos to you for really kind of seeing that pattern emerge.
All right. So with that, I would like to thank all of our panelists for their time, their expertise, and their very thoughtful comments. We will end with each of the panels giving you one takeaway that they have from their talk, and I'll start with Amanda.
Thanks, Julie. My takeaway point is that integrating self-care into your routine early and often helps you stay connected to your identity, those other parts of your identity outside of caregiving, helps you restore a sense of hopefulness about the future, create boundaries, and helps you rebalance your life so you can feel more like yourself, resilient, and ready for the next day.
And Julia?
Thanks, Amanda. And then, I think it's important to remember that integrating self-care does not have to consume your entire day. As much as we would all love to sit around and journal or have bonbons or get a facial, we might not have time for that. So try to create, when you can though, get it. Create and utilize a toolkit. Think about those areas of your well-being that you feel need support. Is it your emotional well-being? Is it social? And then try to set some small, achievable goals that you can focus your intention on. And always remember though, celebrate your successes, but forgive your slips. You have to let it go and know that the next day is a different day, and to err is human.
Angela?
I would encourage you to forgive yourself. Don't get down on yourself if you have to, if you dropped or have to change your self-care routine. Please be kind and forgive yourself for that. And self-care moments can be very small, as was mentioned. It could be one breath or 3 breaths, or it could be a short walk, or it could be a cup of tea. Any of those can be opportunities to care for yourself.
And Alan?
Yeah, be honest with yourself. If you think you have some health needs that need to get taken care of, take care of them. Don't put them off. You're not helping yourself, and you're certainly not helping your care partner. Don't be afraid to get help if you need it.
All right. And I want to just add one more thing that came in from the audience, which pertains to our last question about patience. I think it's valuable to share this. And they said they pause and ask the following questions in their head. Is this the end of the world? Question 1. Is it a life and death situation? Question 2. And is anybody going to get hurt? And the answers almost always are no. And it allows them to move on without showing the irritation and blowing up. So I thought those were very helpful. I wanted to share them. So with that, again, I want to thank all of you. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Supermus Pharmaceuticals and Kiowa Kirin, and also to please encourage you to take our survey. Again, it's in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. It's just 5 questions, and we will put your name in a drawing. And then also to remind you that the next session will be June 22nd from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and the topic will be care partnering and Parkinson's disease, the emotional roller coaster. Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you on our next session.